The senator from Kentucky.
We are engaged in a third war at a time when our country is struggling under an enormous debt, at a time when we are engaged in two wars. Historically, our country has fought war by asking for congressional authority. This was true under Iraq. This was true in Afghanistan. The president came to Congress, and there was a vote on a use of force prior to him engaging in force. Now, some say, well, this is no big deal. The president should be able to fight war whenever he wants to fight war. I beg to differ, and our founding fathers beg to differ. Madison said that the Constitution supposes what history demonstrates, that the executive is the branch most prone to war and most interested in it. Therefore, the Constitution has, with studied care, invested the power to declare war in the Congress. I think this is an incredibly important debate. When we talk about sending our young men and women into harm's way, into another war, the fact that we would have a president send us to war without any debate. Your people's representatives have had absolutely no debate, and we are now involved in a third war. The language of my resolution is not unfamiliar to many. The language of this resolution are the president's words. In 2007, Barack Obama said, "The president does not have power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation." This was very, very clear what the president said, and I agree with what candidate Barack Obama said. We should not go to war without congressional authority. These are the checks and balances that give you a say, that give the people of America a say through their representatives. This allows us to say when we go to war through our Congress, not through one individual, but through 535 individuals that you elect. I think the decision to go to war is such an important one that we shouldn't leave it up to one person. Our founding fathers agreed with this. In the 1970s, after Vietnam, we voted on something called the War Powers Act. We did give the president the right to go to war in certain circumstances. These circumstances were, 1, if Congress had declared war; 2, if Congress had authorized use of military force; or 3, if there was imminent danger to our country. I think all of us recognize that. If we were in imminent danger of attack, we would allow the president some latitude, but we would expect very quickly for him to come to Congress and ask for permission. In this instance, even the Secretary of Defense has said that Libya is not in our national interest. There is no threat to our national security, and yet we are now involved in a third war. We've already spent $600 million in the first 3 days of this war. There has been no constitutional authority given to the president to be committing troops to this war. This is such an important constitutional principle that while I'm new here in the Senate, I am appalled that the Senate has abdicated their responsibility. The Senate has chosen not to act and to allow this power to gravitate to the president. I think that the precedent for allowing a president to continue to act or to initiate war without congressional review, without congressional votes, without the representatives of the people having any say, is a real problem. There was an article this morning in the Washington Times by General Mark Kimmett. In that, he says that there is a climate of cognitive dissonance surrounding the discussion as military objectives seem detached from U.S. policy, the lack of connectivity between the use of force and campaign objectives, the subordination of the military to a non-decisive purpose turns decades of policy on the use of force on its head. This is from General Kimmett this morning. Vital national interests are not threatened, nor have sanctions failed or diplomacy been exhausted. We are putting the lives of our troops at risk in a non-decisive role for a mission that does not meet the threshold of a vital or national interest. This is General Kimmett goes on further. For a military carrying the burden of 3 wars on its back for the foreseeable future, a policy of more frequent intervention and suboptimal use of force as an instrument of diplomacy is a mistake. I come from a state, Kentucky, that has 2 military bases. I see our young men and women going to war, and I worry about their families and themselves engaged in 2 wars. Some of these young men and women have been going to war for 10 years now. And the president now is going to engage us in a 3rd war without any consultation, without any voting in Congress, and without any congressional authority. I think this is a very serious breach of our Constitution. It is something that we should not let happen lightly. It is something that we should object strenuously to, and that we should force a debate in this body. Many debates historically have happened here, many important debates. And what's happening now is we are abdicating our duty and allowing this to be made unilaterally by one individual. I think it's a mistake, I think it's a travesty, and I think it should end. There have been some questions about who these people are that we will be supporting in this new war. I think there's no question that Gaddafi is a tyrant, an autocrat, and someone that freedom-loving people would despise. However, do we know who the rebels are? During the 1980s, we supported the freedom fighters in Afghanistan. Do you know who turned out to be the leader of the freedom fighters, or one of the leaders? Osama bin Laden. Now our mortal enemy was receiving money from the United States and support from the United States for over a decade. In fact, the State Department's stated goals in Afghanistan during the 1980s was radical jihad. We were in favor of radical jihad because we thought the Islamic radicals hated the Russians worse than us. They did until they got rid of the Russians. Now they hate us as much or more. I think we have to be very careful in going to war. I told my constituents when I ran for office that the most important vote I would ever take would be on sending their men and women, the boys and girls, the young men and women in my state or anywhere across the United States to war. To me, it's an amazing thing that we would do this so lightly without any consideration by this august body, to send our young men and women to war without any congressional approval. There have been some reports in the media about possible ties of al-Qaeda to the rebels. This morning in the Washington Post, a former leader of Libya's al-Qaeda affiliate says he thinks freelance jihadists have joined the rebel forces. NATO commander says some of al-Qaeda and Hezbollah forces are fighting Gaddafi forces. Former jihadist Norman Benatman estimates 1,000 jihadists in Libya. These are the rebels. We have to ask ourselves, when Gaddafi's gone, who will take his place? A 2007 West Point study showed that 19% of foreign al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan hail from Libya. Libya has been supplying the second leading amount of jihadists to the war in Afghanistan. Interestingly, where do these fighters go? Do the fighters come back to Libya to haunt us? When Gaddafi is gone, will we now have an al-Qaeda-supported government in Libya? But I think most importantly are not the practical aspects of going to war, it's that we didn't follow the Constitution in going to war, and we should have. The Constitution says very clearly that the power to declare war is a power that was given to Congress and not to the President. James Madison in the Federalist Papers was very explicit that this was a power given to Congress and not to the President. The President's own words are incredibly important here. The hypocrisy is amazing. In 2007, the President said, any president does not have the power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation. And yet here we have a president cavalierly taking us to war. He seems to have had a lot of time to talk to people. He talked to the Arab League. They had time to get together and vote on it. He talked to the UN. They had time to get together and vote on it. But he had utter disregard and contempt for the most important body in the United States that represents the people, the U.S. Congress. Utter contempt. He's gone to NATO. He's gone to our allies. He's gone to the UN. He's gone to the Arab League. But he has not had one single minute of debate in Congress. To add insult to injury, he chose to go to war while in Brazil, while Congress was not even in session. This really, really should not be the way we operate as a constitutional republic. I'm saddened that no one here seems to stand up and say, why in the world would we let a president take us to war without any debate? Why in the world, when we're involved in 2 wars, would we get involved with a 3rd war without having a debate in Congress? This, to me, is a remarkable and really tragic set of events. I hope that the Congress and the Senate in particular will see fit to pass this motion, which sends the bill back to committee with specific instructions. The specific instructions are the President's words, and I'll be more than interested to see whether his supporters here in the Senate will support the candidate Barack Obama or now the hypocritical version that has become our president. This is an important question beyond, I think, any question that we will address in this year. Our fiscal problems are really a tragic problem that we face now, but this really pales in comparison. To usurp the power of war, to take that power upon himself unilaterally without any debate in Congress. I urge the passage of this motion and recommittal to committee.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, in response to the gentleman